Prakriya 8. Merging into non-duality. Sleep in consciousness. In his regular talks, Sri Atmananda used to give an ordered introduction to some main prakriyas, for the three states to the changeless background. The prakriyas show different aspects of the same truth, to which they each reflect. Each prakriya relates back there to that truth where each must point and get dissolved. It's only thus, by merging back, that different prakriya relate. The order that relates them is a subtle one, which cannot be constructed as a formal system. It can only be unfolded naturally by a repeated merging back into that single truth from which all prakriyas arise. In fact, as shown by the background prakriya, we merge back into truth at every moment of our various lives. But through blind habit of conditioned ego, we don't see just where it is that we are merged continually. What an Advaita teacher does is to take a sadhaka to truth through a higher reasoning that makes it plain and completely clear just what truth is in itself as the sadhaka is merged back there. When a sadhaka thus merges back with complete and utter clarity, Sri Atmananda describes the experience as a visualization of truth. And here it must be understood that the word visualized is being used in a special way. It does not refer to any partial seeing of a physical or mental perception. Whatever truth is rightly visualized, the visualizing is an utterly impartial seeing, with no last remaining trace of partial mind and body still confusingly mixed up with it. At the time when it occurs, that visualizing is complete and clear, with not the faintest trace of any partiality or misunderstanding. But as the sadhaka's mind and body are thus left behind, to visualize the truth, this mind and body may yet still retain impurities of possessive ego, which have not yet been eradicated from the sadhaka's character. If so, the lingering impurities will later reassert themselves, so that the visualization gets to be obscured. Then more work of sadhana is needed. Using the teacher's prakriyas, or any other prakriyas that may be discovered or invented, the sadhaka must keep turning back, from ego's straying to the truth that has been shown. By thus refreshing the visualization over and over again, the truth keeps being emphasized at the expense of mistaken ego. As lingering impurities of ego get removed, the visualization gets to be steadier and less easily obscured. Finally, the ego gets completely eradicated and the visualization stays completely steady and uninterrupted. That unbroken seeing of the truth is called the sahaja, or natural state. The truth is then spontaneously understood, without the need of any clarifying effort, no matter what may happen or appear. In such a sahaja, or natural state, the confused sense of a sadhaka, or a seeker, is no more. This confusion has then gone, by seeing it as a facade of partial personality, whose changing tricks of made-up show have made no real difference. In place of this personal confusion, the Jnani, or sage, has irrevocably taken charge upon a changeless stand that is utterly impartial and spontaneous. To describe the steadying of visualization into irrevocable spontaneity, Sri Atmananda spoke of establishment in truth. And towards that establishment, he encouraged his disciples to discover or invent new prakriyas for themselves. By way of an example, he spoke of an idealist prakriya, which investigates the role of memory in our experience of the world. This prakriya points out that all such experience depends upon past memories that come into a person through our minds. So at any point of time, what's actually present of the world can be seen as an idea made up from current memory in mind. There's nothing found here added to the ever-present consciousness. The outside world is thus reduced to inner mind, and then what's left is only mind, with no outside thing and no outside influence. In that pure mind, there's nothing found to make it in the least bit different from the present consciousness that knows it. Accordingly, the mind is in its turn identical with the present reality of consciousness. And that is no seeming triviality of physical or mental ego. Instead, it is the non-dual truth of knowing self and everything that's known, including the entire world. And finally, as a summation of Advaita reasoning, Sri Atmananda said that it reduces all world and all perceptions, thought, and feeling to pure consciousness, which can only be realized as one's own truth of self. But from this summing up, a question may arise. Why is it centered upon pure chit, or consciousness? What about the other aspects of sat, or existence, and ananda, or happiness? An answer comes from the nature of the prakriyas. They proceed through reason, starting with the assumption and constructions of lower reason, and then going on to reflective questioning of higher reason. Such reason prakriyas are centrally concerned with knowing, where consciousness comes first. To examine existence and happiness, it must be asked, how are they known? They must be known by reflecting back to consciousness, and observing them from there. This is not much of a problem for existence, because it is natural to verify existence by observing it. But when happiness is concerned, the same does not apply, for it is more natural to feel happiness rather than observing it. Such feeling implies a motivational depth of knowledge, which we call love. Accordingly, the aspect of happiness implies a further and deeper approach, which concerns the motivating heart of reason and inquiry. This deeper approach is, of course, the devotional love of bhakti. For Sri Atmananda, Advaita bhakti is a very delicate matter between teacher and disciple. He insisted that it is not subject to any mind-initiating reasoning. Thus he treated it as a deeply emotional issue, which must be left to itself, beyond the reach of thinking intellect. All that he would say is that the teacher stands for truth itself, at the center of a disciple's heart. Once truth has been shown by an Advaita teacher, all further sadhana proceeds from there and comes back there. Without that living guidance from within, no sadhana is rightly meaningful. For sadhana toward establishment in truth, his general advice to disciples was in two parts. First, to face squarely whatever may come up to confront the disciple in the world. And second, having faced each occurrence squarely, to reflect upon it spiritually, thus returning to the truth that stays always unaffected by what happens in both world and personality. But there is also a particular sadhana, which he described by two short injunctions: sleep knowingly and sleep in consciousness. To give an idea of this sadhana, a series of questions are given below, from Sri Nityatripta's Notes on Spiritual Discourses of Sri Atmananda. These quotations may also help to relate this sadhana to some practices and conceptions of traditional meditation. From Note 1. We get to our real nature by relaxing our mind from all forms of activity, and at the same time not losing sight of the happiness and peace experienced in deep sleep. This positive aspect saves us from the probable shroud of negation and slumber. We should not allow the mind to be active, and at the same time, we should see that it does not become inactive. In other words, sleep knowingly. Thus, deep sleep can be utilized directly for establishing oneself in the real center. Note 39. The poet Tennyson says, in his poem Ulysses, "Pursue knowledge like a sinking star, beyond the utmost bound of human thought." It will take you a long way if you think deeply about what Tennyson meant by this statement. Sinking star may mean this. Sinking implies relaxation. You have only to retreat and retreat into the I principle and rest there. Allow yourself, therefore, to be led on. Sink, sink, sink. Sink from the body, sink from the senses, and sink from the mind. Ashtavaraka says, in a similar context, this means separating body from you. If you take rest in consciousness, you stand liberated here and now. 1.4. From Note 112. Sleep away the whole world, clinging onto consciousness, said the sage Ashtavaraka. The use of the word sleep in the transitive form, though peculiar, is specially meaningful. It means give up name and form and rest quietly in the background. From Note 597. Again from the Ashtavaraka Gita. This means sleep in consciousness. This is the royal road to the natural state. Note 599. How to sleep knowingly. Know that you are going to sleep. Let that thought be as vague as possible. Then empty your mind of all intruding thoughts, taking care not to strain the mind in the least. Having understood from the Guru that your real nature alone shines in its own glory in deep sleep. If you relax into deep sleep, as already suggested, the deep sleep shall no longer be a state, but your true nature, even beyond nirvikalpa samadhi. Sleep involuntarily, and you will be taken to the ignorant man's deep sleep. Sleep voluntarily, and you will be taken to nirvikalpa samadhi. Sleep knowingly, and you will be taken right to your real nature, your natural state, beyond all samadhi. From note 669. In relaxation, one should have something to hold on to. If you hold on to the I and relax the senses and mind, you get to real sleep. Let the mind be asleep to the whole world and wakeful to the I. From note 806. See that either end of your sleep is saturated with the thought of your real nature, your native home. Note 1241. Experiences of two kinds: Vastu Tantra, governed by reality, and Kartri Tantra, governed by a doer. Vastu Tantra is begotten of Atma. Kartri Tantra is begotten of doership. All experience of duality, including even the yogin's Nirvikalpa Samadhi, are Kartri Tantra. The experience which takes me straight to my real nature of peace and consciousness is alone Vastu Tantra. Vastu Tantra, being Atmic, is beyond feeling. Kartri Tantra, being mental, is capable of being felt, but is fleeting. Mental satisfaction can be derived both from truth as well as from untruth. Vastu Tantra is not the result of any activity or inactivity, but Kartri Tantra is always the result of activity, which takes the form of desire and effort for its fulfillment. When the disciple, who is a waking subject, is told by the Guru that even his phenomenal satisfaction is not derived from objects, but that it is his own real nature shining in its own glory, his doership, which is the center of Kartri Tantra, crumbles forever. Desire torments him no more, and satisfaction is transformed into permanent peace. When this sublime peace, Vastu Tantra, is sought to be brought down to respond to Kartri Tantra, guided by varying tastes and tendencies, a host of new concepts in the form of religions, heavens, objects of pleasure, and so on begin to appear. Therefore, give up your tastes, tendencies, and desires, not at all violently, but by knowing, and by knowing more and more deeply, that all satisfaction is the expression of your own real nature of peace, and you shall be forever free. The state of peace and deep sleep is the most familiar experience of Vastu Tantra in daily life. The annihilation of all Kartri Tantra is the ultimate goal of Vedanta. This establishes Vastu Tantra without any positive effort whatsoever. Look at deep sleep. You have only to give up your attachment to body, senses, and mind in the waking and dream states. Immediately, peace, Vastu Tantra, dawns, permanent and self-luminous. Deep sleep comes involuntarily and without the help of discrimination. Therefore, it disappears after a while. Establish the same state voluntarily and with discrimination. When once you visualize it this way, it will never disappear. 8a. Visualization and establishment. Question. May I take what you said concerning establishment and truth as the Stitva Prajnanatvam of the Bhagavad Gita that results when the seeker virtually becomes the prajnana of Aham Brahmamsi? Answer. Yes, I would say that the Sthita Prajna, described in the Bhagavad Gita 2:54 through 57, could be interpreted as one who is established in truth, and Sri Atmananda's use of this phrase. But for that, the stanza would need to be interpreted from a Jnanic approach. Here is how I would go about it. Arjuna asked, what may be said of one who is established in true knowledge and stands there absorbed? How does that person speak, sit down, and move about? Krishna replied, when all desires going deep into the mind have finally been given up, a person comes to lasting peace and happiness in self alone, all by itself. When someone gets to live there quite spontaneously, remaining always undisturbed, no matter what takes place, that someone is then said to be established in true knowledge. Such a one of steady understanding stays unshaken inwardly, no longer driven by possessive want, nor by desire, fear, and rage, through all the miseries and joys that mind gets into. Such a one who stands upon unchanging ground is called a sage. Whatever happens, good or bad, someone whose knowledge is established stays impartial everywhere, quite unaffected by complacency when things go well, or by frustration at receiving ill. You may well ask what might be so special about a jnana interpretation to make it different from more usual interpretations. Well, I would say that the usual interpretation is the one you imply in your question. When you speak of realization as resulting, quote, when the seeker virtually becomes the prajnana of Aham Brahmasmi. The word becomes here indicates a transformation of personality, which implies a yogic approach of mind expansion and character improvement through meditative exercise. And quite rightly, you qualify the becomes with the verb virtually in order to indicate a shift toward an Advaitic jnana approach. In such a jnana approach, it is acknowledged that the seeker already is the truth which is sought, so that there is no need to attempt any becoming through yogic meditation. The only need is for the sadhaka to realize that she or he was never bound, and to keep returning to that realization until it becomes steady and spontaneous. As Sri Atmananda put it, even after a disciple has been taken fully to the truth, he or she may lapse into a remaining phase of identification as one who still thinks that she or he has realized. A mistaken identification thus persists for a while, but the mistake of ego has been cut at its very root, so that the mistake does not go on becoming replenished as before. Instead, it is irrevocably on the way of working itself out. The working out is then best assisted by returning back to realization over and over again, through a direct inquiry whose sole target of concern is only truth and nothing else. All character improvement is thus left behind, to function as a mere side effect in the seeming paradoxes and confusions of partial personality and world. Question. With regard to memories of the past, does Sri Atmananda acknowledge the traditional vasanas and samskaras of past lives? This is asked because I find myself confronting an outside world of situations that are not warranted by the memories of this life alone. Answer. Yes, Sri Atmananda did sometimes use ideas of transmigration, and he did have insights into the past life samskaras of particular persons. But he did not generally require or even encourage his disciples to get involved with this conception of past lives. In fact, he specifically told his disciples that they would be better off seeing this conception as a metaphor for the more immediate death and rebirth that each person keeps experience in the present. As each thought dies into pure consciousness, from which alone all thoughts continue to be born. Question. There is a visualization of my body, with only the sense of tactility supporting it. The object slowly vanishes, taken in by the light that lights it up. Then there remains only the light. I am pure light. No thoughts that worry about this physical property of size and magnitude of brilliance. Only light. Let us call it the light of awareness. Then something unfortunate happens. The oblivion of sleep greedily gulps the light down, making the whole scenario a blankness about which I can be aware only when I wake. That is no different from an ignorant man's sleep. How then to sink down and down, a la Tennyson? Any personal tips that you have would be really helpful to all of us. Is there a need to sleep knowingly, whatever that implies? Answer. I use the word visualization in a way that is quite different from your description above. What you seem to be describing is a process of meditation, which progresses from bodily tactility to clear light and pure awareness, before getting engulfed in the blankness of sleep. For me, the word visualization refers to a timeless understanding that is reached at the background of experience, where all sense of time and process has completely disappeared. That timeless understanding is not built up through any meditative process. Rather, it's more like a sudden throwback into timelessness, which somehow follows doubting reason or some other stimulus to inner reflection. And this throwback happens in a quirky and paradoxical way that undermines any talk of its location or duration in time. It must, after all, be a paradox to talk of when or for how long one has been thrown out of time, or indeed, to talk of what one is in that timelessness, where no change occurs so as to make comparisons possible. The throwback is indeed into utter dissolution of appearances, and in that sense, it is into an oblivion of the world. But it is not into a blank and meaningless nothingness. Instead, it is into peace and light, which somehow means just that, for which all things are done. And it means that without saying it, or thinking it, or feeling it. But of course, it is completely absurd and utterly inadequate to describe such a visualization in this way. The whole thing appears in a flash, so that it's over as soon as it started, and there can be no memory of it afterward in mind. So it always must get lost and quite misinterpreted, whenever it is drawn out into some long-winded description in words, or when some big thing is made of it in grand ideas or in some sentimental feelings. Such a visualization does its work best when it is done quietly, by relaxing into it. That is the aim of trying to sleep knowingly. This sadhana is intended to promote an increasingly relaxed visualization of truth. When the visualization gets to become completely relaxed, the visualization occurs with utter spontaneity, of its own accord. Then it is permanent, with no effort required to induce it. The sadhaka has then at last dissolved, established in the truth.